This is me. Enjoy. I have to warn you, I got a Valentine's Day yesterday. I'm going to read it. This is my son who's 9. And the bottom half of the Valentine was, Mom, you are talented and resilient. Dad, you're creative and witty with your dad jokes. Sort of. So that's just a warning that this could get a little cheesy, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to go through all these different aspects of planned giving and legacy giving. And I could tell from our introductions, a lot of people talked about endowment building, which I'm going to refer to as legacy building. And as I go through this and talk about different definitions, I'm going to try to give you 3 major takeaways. So you should, I'll tell you when to write stuff down, but also this is recorded. The presentation is going to be sent to everyone. So don't feel like you need to, take notes. And with that, I just would love you to put in the chat right now one thing you want to make sure we cover today. And I make no promises, but I'm going to read it and do my best. So let's all just take a minute and just write one thing you want to get out of today's presentation. I can't even see the chat. Okay, marketing we'll cover. The best way to start a planned giving program, I'll talk about that. Okay, everyone else is really quiet. Here we go, setting the stage, confidence in asking for a gift. Governance, I won't really get into governance, but I'll talk about your board. Different avenues for success in planned giving, I'll definitely cover that. All right, so I'm going to start going. So the first thing we're going to do is a quiz, because who doesn't love a quiz? And what I want you to do is match the terms at the top with the pictures at the bottom with the definitions. So we have a piggy bank, we have the stock market, and the apocalyptic picture, which I have trouble saying, I don't know why, is really an emergency type situation. So if you could take the terms and match them to a picture. And this doesn't go on your permanent record. If you know, you know. If you don't know, no one will know you don't know. Can you pull it up, Rochelle? Or
yes, waiting for a few more to fill it out. We're halfway there.
I'm not going to start singing Bon Jovi, but whenever I hear halfway there, I hope it goes through everyone's head. There'll be other 80s/90s comments. You ready?
Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Oh, a few more voting. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. Okay, can you see the results?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. So can you leave it for 1 second?
Yes.
And I'm going to talk about this really quick because I want everyone to understand what all these are. Okay, so a donor advised fund is a charitable giving account. I would love for someone just to guess how much money are in donor advised funds. All right, no one's blurting it out, so I will. 200 and what did you say?
Billions with a B.
Billions with a B. $229 billion are in donor advised funds. So individuals like any of you on this call could have a donor advised fund, and you would hold it with, so the JUF has it, Chicago Community Trust, but also large financial institutions, Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard. You can have one with them. Basically, you open it up, you get an immediate charitable tax deduction. So that's awesome. Later, you decide what charities you want the money to go to. And what's even cooler, not only do you decide that, but your $10,000 that you initially put in there gets invested. So over time, it can grow. So you can give away, in theory, more money than you put in there. And you can support any charity as long as it's a 501c3. And they're growing. They have been the fastest form of philanthropy for years. It's not slowing down. You need to make sure your organization is getting gifts from donor-advised funds. All right, the next, the next one is endowment fund. An endowment fund, oh my God, funny, is emergency, it's an emergency fund. So that's where, again, how did I get this wrong? So funny. And we'll go over an endowment fund soon, so I'm not going to go into details. Also, I think everyone on this call knows. Appreciated assets. Okay, so appreciated assets is the stock market. These gifts, it can be other appreciated assets, but your organization should be getting gifts of stock. This is the number one takeaway. You want to make sure your organization is getting non-cash assets regularly. The more non-cash assets your organization gets, like appreciated stock, which is just stock that's been held for more than 1 year and went from 100 to 105, as long as it's appreciated. There's many benefits, and I'll talk about those later, but it's really important that you're getting these gifts. Questions, comments?
Ron, when you say that you're getting these gifts, can you clarify what that means for people? So how
Sure.
would they get these gifts?
Sure, that's a great question. The way you're getting these gifts, and some people might not even know, you'd have to look at how gifts are coming in to know what the source is. So it's really important you have some sort of database that's tracking this. And I know there's a million different ones out there, but really you want to make sure you know when someone makes a gift and it comes in and it's, let's say $5,000 from the Fidelity donor advised fund, you want to make sure you're tracking, okay, so, this came in from John Smith's Vanguard donor advised fund. So you want to make sure you lock that in. And next year, when you're sending out a mailing, you reach out to him and you say, well, last year you gave from your donor advised fund. We would love it if you do it this year. And for gifts of stock, it's along this. Sometimes it's a little tricky because to take gifts of stock, you have to have a financial organization. And I'm not a CPA, I'm not a money manager or a lawyer, but I know you need to have a financial institution that takes the stock from Sarah Gold, sells that stock that Sarah Gold gave, and gives it to your company. You should know that it's $5,000 from Sarah Gold from her Apple or whatever it is. So it's important to track it. And one thing I recommend is putting on your website a sheet where people can put in, I'm donating X dollars from Apple to your nonprofit. And if you go to, and I'm not going to pull it up now because I don't have time, but if you go to like juf.org and look at planned giving, gifts of stock, we built a whole page where people put in all this information. And that really helps you, one, know who to market to next year, stock gifts. Two, sometimes the gifts come in and you don't really know who they're from. So if you can have this space on your website, it really helps you know and match up dollar amounts to gifts. Does that make sense? I know I went fast. All right, I want to move to the next slide. All right, what is planned giving? Okay, so planned giving, and this beautiful picture you see on the right, which was generated with AI, which hopefully you're all using, and we should have another one of these talking about AI and fundraising because it's amazing. But planned giving, it's just different ways to make gifts to your annual campaign, but also to your endowment fund. So it's really important that you know how you're getting gifts And that these gifts, like I mentioned, stock, I'll talk about retirement assets, life insurance. These are different ways people can make gifts to your organization, and they grow both your annual campaign, which I'm going to refer to as your checking account, and then your endowment campaign, which is your savings account. So I know it gets a little tricky, and the next slide hopefully will explain it better. But a lot of you talked about endowments and having an endowment. It's just in a fund, and it can be several funds depending on how your organization is set up. And there's lots of intricacies to it. But basically, when you establish an endowment fund at your organization, you're creating a savings account. And what's awesome is the more money you have in there, the better off your organization is long term, because it sets a percentage of your endowments you could spend every year. You could set that policy, and that's part of your board governance. You decide how much you want to distribute. You can also decide, does your board, do they tell you you can invade those funds? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So it's really important that you talk to a financial money manager, and B, talk to your CEO and your chair to find out how you want this to function, because there are different options, and I just don't have time to go into all of them today. But the takeaway here is this is your savings account, and you want to grow it. And I'm going to tell you how you can grow it as we go on. I'm going to take a quick break because this is a lot of information. Questions, comments?
Ron, Hal had a question about a donor's gift being anonymous and how a person can give that gift anonymously, whether it's anonymous to the organization or publicly as well.
Okay, well, that's a great question, Hal. You can give any gift anonymously. Normally, the organization knows it's from you, and you just tell them it's anonymous. And on one of the last slides, I talk about a donor of intent or a letter of intent, and people can mark that it's anonymous. Now, when donors donate from a giving vehicle like a donor advised fund, a supporting foundation, or even, other types of gifts, they can leave their name off it. It's hard for the organization tracking wise, but there are ways around it. But in general, the charity knows, but they won't recognize you if you don't want to be recognized. And that's part of good stewardship. Okay, in the notes, I'm going to go old school here, and we're going to see if anyone can tell me what movie this quote is from. Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is a man. Anyone? I'll give you a hint. It's football is involved. Is anyone guessing?
Elizabeth said Ace Ventura.
Oh my God. Okay. Listen, next time you're in Chicago, lunch on me. Yes, awesome. So the reason I said that is legacy giving is planned giving. Planned giving is legacy giving. It's really complicated, but I'm going to make it super simple for you. You should be getting planned gifts to your annual campaign. I talked about stock. I talked about donor advised funds. I've talked about retirement assets. Those are all things you should be getting every year to your annual campaign. What's cool is people can also leave your organization those gifts in their will or estate plan. And that's what I call a legacy gift. So you can build your endowment and your annual campaign with these tools. Does that make sense? Just hand up, head nod. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give you takeaway number 2 right here. Talk to your donors about legacy giving. A lot of people are scared to. We're probably not going to get into the conversation exactly today, but you need to talk to your donors about remembering your organization in their plans. And what's great, and the reason I really love this ask, it's really low pressure. Most people, this sounds like a used car salesman, they give you no money today, but when they die, they leave you a percentage of their retirement plan. They can leave you stock. They can leave you part of their donor advised fund. And people are really excited because in general, the largest gift you can make is really in your will. Now, we're going to talk about prospecting, and there's other things you should listen to, and we'll get there. But just know people want to remember you. They want to be remembered, and they want to remember your organization. This is takeaway 3. When you're getting these gifts, when people are giving you money for tomorrow, you need to make sure you're talking about them. And we'll talk about this in marketing too, but it's really important. And again, if they want to be anonymous, you obviously can't talk about them. But the more you start highlighting these people and that people are making these gifts and thinking about this stuff, word will spread and it will really help with your fundraising and building up your endowment. Rochelle or Stephanie, any questions on this or comments?
I think we
Okay.
can get to more general questions at the end, but definitely we can keep going.
Okay, awesome. One thing I want to say, there are other planned gifts. Like this is just like high level, easy ones to explain. But there are other ones, and we're not going to get to today, but just know there's other ways people can leave gifts, but these are really common and super simple. All right, so I would love it if someone would interject here so I can stop talking for a minute. And if they could explain 2 or 3 of these. So raise your hand if you can talk about what these pictures represent. And I can't see any hand raised. Oh, I see Jane. Thank you.
Okay, so you want me to explain a couple of them?
That would be fantastic.
Okay. Wall Street would be the stocks that they may have, or that can be given now or later. A good
Perfect.
good example would be Berkshire Hathaway for a lot of reasons. Um,
That's perfect, yeah.
Or stocks that have appreciated a lot and they don't want to take the capital gains. Life insurance, they can have a policy where the beneficiary can be the organization, or they can receive a portion of that life insurance payout.
Fantastic. So realize some people have lots of insurance and they don't want to give all of it to their kids or to whomever. They could leave 1%, 5 grand, whatever it may be, to your organization. Life insurance is a really common planned gift. Sorry, go on.
No problem. I'm just spitting out what my daughter's taught me.
She's taught you
All right.
well.
And then I'm going to go to last will and testament, because you can set aside in your will a set amount of money and say that you want certain percentages or certain amounts going to different organizations. It doesn't have to be an all or none prospect.
Jane, you are on fire. Thank you so much for participating. You get a gold star.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone else want to talk about the last 3? And they're not so, these aren't the best pictures. So I'll talk about the last 3. All right. So on the far right, it's a couple holding hands. And this is a weak picture, I admit it, but it's the best I could do. It's retirement. And and I want you to think about IRA type of retirement, 401k. It's about giving from your retirement assets. Now, your retirement assets are heavily taxed at death. So it's a great thing to leave to a charity. So that's something you can talk to your donors about, and it's super easy to do. Another thing, and this is something you should write down, the IRA charitable rollover. I'm going to say it one more time. IRA charitable rollover. So if you are 70 and a half or older, and you have an IRA, you have to take what they call a qualified minimum distribution every year. It's just, you have to do it. And some people, they don't need it, or they don't need all of it. So what you can do is you can go to your Fidelity and say, I want to leave this charity $5,000 from my IRA this year as a qualified minimum distribution. And you can do this up to $100,000. And it is a great way to make a gift. You lower your taxable estate. You don't get a charitable deduction, but there are other tax benefits. But it's a very common. When I left JUF a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, $4 million a year was coming to the annual campaign from the IRA charitable rollover. Questions about that? Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right, so it's all about the Benjamins. Gifts of cash are great. Everybody loves cash. They just do. And what's interesting is in a new study, they've shown that adults age 60 to 70 are making outright endowment gifts. So this is kind of weird because I just didn't believe it until I read the study, and I wish I had it to quote. But basically, I was blown away. They apparently want to see their dollars being used today instead of when they're no longer around. So what's awesome about this is if you know someone has sold a business, got an inheritance, they might not want to give your annual campaign 500 grand because that's a big annual campaign gift. And everybody knows if you leave 500, if you make a 500 grand gift to an annual campaign this year, next year, you want $500,001. So a lot of people are making outright endowment gifts. So they're giving your endowment 500 grand. And this is really where stewardship comes in understanding your donor. And if you know they've come into money or they are interested in making an impact today, this might be an opportunity to talk to them. This last cup, china, whatever you want to call it, people leave crazy stuff to charities. I've seen art, I've seen china, I've seen tchotchkes that like your grandmother had in the room you couldn't sit in when you were a kid because you could break it. And you know what? That's great. The only issue is if you're a nonprofit, going back to governance, you can say you don't accept those kind of gifts. You can just flat out say, we only accept X, Y, and Z, or we don't accept gifts of art or whatever. But if you do accept these gifts, you then have to collect them. You then have to have them appraised. You then have to sell them. It's a whole process. And sometimes people leave beautiful artworks that you could make lots of money selling. Other times it's not so beneficial. So really, when you're thinking about growing your endowment, this would be like the smallest bucket. I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, so prospecting.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm going back to the IRA distribution where you said somebody 70 and a half can donate from their IRA. But then you
Yes.
said there's no tax break.
So the way it works is they don't get a charitable tax deduction. There are still benefits from a tax perspective, but it's not like writing a check.
Okay, but when you take money out of your IRA, you're getting taxed on that money.
Right, but if you donate it to a charity, you are not taxed on that money.
Oh, okay. So
So-
you're taxed on the net and not the gross. I get it.
Okay, Hal, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's really important for people to understand. Just actually someone clued me in on this, and now all of my charitable giving is coming out of my IRAs because with the new tax laws, with the with the new minimum deductibles, many middle income people no longer can deduct charitable giving because they're not giving enough to get to the minimum amount to itemize. However, anything coming out of your IRA is taxable. But if you give it as a charitable gift, that does not count as income. So that's immediately a tax benefit of whatever marginal tax bracket you're at, a reduction in the income and tax on that amount, so it's not taxed. And I don't know if there's any limits. I haven't heard of
You
any.
can give up to $100,000
Up to
per
100,000.
year.
Okay.
And if you're married, you and your spouse, you can each give 100 grand. So that's 200,000.
Yeah.
So it's
Very important.
been, thank you, Hal. That was great. Yeah, it's huge. And I highly recommend doing some more research when this call is over. I feel like there was another hand up.
Yeah, I have one more.
Please.
Just a comment. I was told, so if you're deciding you're going to leave 5% of your net worth to a charity, that it should come out of your retirement, your IRA or Roth, because anything that goes to your children is taxable. But if it's coming out of your IRA, it's not taxable. So your children will end up with more. Just a way to look at it.
Well, so your IRA, so you want to leave your kids other assets than your IRA because your IRA is heavily taxed.
Right.
So it's a great gift to get. So it's a great gift for your annual campaign right now, but it's also a great gift to leave to a charity because of the tax issue. And it's really, we can't really go into it now, but it's really amazing when you play with how people leave their money. And if they do it a different way, the tax savings, it's really huge. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Though really the takeaway from this slide is major life changes. Those are great times to talk to donors about legacy gifts. When things happen in their lives that change their situation, that's when they start thinking about, mortality, about legacy. These are just a few examples that when you're talking to your donors, and you can tell your donor officers, hey, make sure you're paying attention to these clues. Someone sold a business. Someone inherited some money. They're working on their retirements. Their children are out of college. They're empty nesters. These are situations where you also might have more disposable income than you used to have. So they could be larger annual campaign donors, but also this is a great time to talk to them about legacy gifts. And one thing to think about, even when they're first starting out, like when my wife and I had kids, someone tell me, what's one of the first things you should do when you have a kid?
Save for college.
Amen. Oh my God, that's no joke. You should
Update
save
your
for
will.
college. Yes, a will. You should make a will. God forbid something happens. You want to name who's going to watch over your kids. You want to name where your savings go. You want to name where your life insurance goes. So when people are putting together their will, even though they might not have tons of money at that point in their life, I know I did not, but I put some charities in my will because I wanted to make sure I took care of the organizations I cared about. So you can talk to younger donors about this, but it's just a different type of conversation. When you're talking about someone older, it's more about, legacy, continuing their passion, and, making sure their gift lives on. With a younger person, it's more, you're very involved. We love how you participate. You're probably putting together your first will. Would you consider leaving a percentage to us? And here's like a free marketing advice, and we'll go over marketing in a minute, but 1%. I worked with a day school in Chicago, and the development director said, I'm doing a 1% campaign, Ron. And if you think about it, 1% could be a large amount of someone's estate, because it could be your house, your savings, retirements, whatever. That really adds up. So when you're thinking about talking to people, not everyone has millions of dollars, but they could make a huge impact with a small percentage of their estate. All right, marketing. I would love for you guys to participate a little bit here. Who here, just let's do this. Raise your hand. We'll go old school. Raise your hand if you're on Facebook. Okay, there's a good percentage of you on Facebook. To me, that means you should talk about plan giving on Facebook. I pushed for years and it never happened. But I do believe it is a great source to talk about plan giving, especially with the demographics on Facebook. There's a huge 60 to 80 age range that keeps growing, who are looking at their grandkids or their children, or they're just showing off how awesome retirement is. So you should talk about different giving vehicles. You should highlight someone who is making a legacy gift, or someone who gives through their donor advised funds. All right, texting. Who here texts? It's got to be everyone, right? Does anyone not text? Hal, do you not text?
Yeah, I text a lot.
Okay, all right. So everyone.
And my kids always give me a hard time that I use too much email, not enough text.
Oh, right, exactly. So as the demographics shift, texting has become more popular with people marketing donations. So a lot of times you'll get a text message instead of an email, or instead of a phone call. Show of hands, who has done dial for dollars? Who's picked up the phone and called a million people asking for money? All right, I spent like 18 years doing that. It's not fun, but it is effective. But what I learned was my email solicitations, way higher percentage made gifts. I was hung up on, I was yelled at, I can't even tell you how many times I heard this joke. You know what we say in my family, if you're ever lost on an island, JUF will find you, so don't worry. I mean, every year, at least one person told me that joke. So I switched and I started emailing people when we did our phone-a-thons. And I had much better rates of gifts. So think about that. Think about how you can, kind of just tweak what you're already doing. Does anyone read, show of hands, who reads a newspaper anymore? Some people do, some people don't. A lot of people do it online. Who reads online newspaper? Me too. I used to have to find someone's old Wall Street journal. I would go through the office and be like, have you seen the journal today? And I would steal it. I would read it. Don't tell anyone. And then I would give it to whoever was supposed to get it next. But now I can just go online. It's way easier. So when you're thinking about magazines, if you put out a magazine, an annual report, this is a great place to talk about plan giving, highlighting legacy givers. The same thing I mentioned for Facebook. So don't think you have to create a whole brand new endowment marketing plan or plan giving plan. Look at what you're currently doing and integrate. That was I don't know if anyone watched SNL back in the 80s, but I can't remember, Dana Carvey used to do this all the time. It was this President Bush or something. I don't know. Anyway, so integrate. That's the takeaway here. Look at what you're doing, integrate. The last thing is direct mail. And I would love to hear from someone who sends out direct mail and tells me about it. Anyone want to talk about what their organization does with direct mail?
This is Tamara. We send out 2 direct mail appeals every year. Those go to, I don't know, like 25,000 people. It's interesting though, in the conservancy sector, and this is like really common throughout our peers, like Yosemite Conservancy, Grand Canyon, Zion. We get the quantity of gifts that we get online is much higher than the checks that we get back, but we raise far more in the checks that we get back than the donations we get online.
I'm so happy you said that. I wanted direct mail to die because, let's be honest, it's a little more work than an email. An email's so easy, but direct mail is not dead. And I'm so happy you said that. People raise lots of money in direct mail. You should reach out to me afterwards. I was just shown this super cool presentation about how you can do direct mail, and advertisers, they will pay for it for you. So it's, I want to say it's Prince, but this guy just gave me his whole spiel. It's amazing. Email me later and we can talk. But direct mail's not dead. When you're doing your annual appeal, you should talk about the IRA charitable rollover, or, don't overwhelm people because, no one wants to read a large letter, but put something in there about a different planned gift. And what's super cool is you can measure it. You can see how many people called, how many people gave out of X, Y, or Z. And then next year, based on those results, you change your marketing. I really oversimplified it, but I'm going to move on because we're running against the clock. Oh, all right. I'm going to go over this super quick because I already hit on this. Look at your communications plan for the year. How can you incorporate different types of giving? Maybe once a month you talk about a different type of planned gift on Facebook. Once a quarter, maybe you're sending a direct mailing or an emailing about different types of gifts. Or be even more strategic. When do people think about charitable deductions? Anyone? I feel like someone just mouthed end of year.
Yeah,
Hal?
end of year.
I read your lips. I was like, I think he said end of year. Right. So at the end of year, you should send a note talking about donor advised funds, gifts of stock, IRA charitable rollover. Every year, you need to do that. And I would send it in October. And then I would send an email in November 15th or something like that, or after Giving Tuesday, something like that. But a lot of people don't give to the end of the year because they don't know their financial situation. They haven't gotten their bonus. So it's really important to think about that. One other free idea, show of hands, who has an annual meeting? Every year they have an annual meeting, whether it's online or in person. A lot of people have annual meetings. When you do that, hey, whoever's a legacy giver, stand up. You can say, hey, this year we received $1 million in blah, blah, blah gifts. And I want to thank those people. If you would just stand up now for a round of applause. It's a really simple way to thank people and make them feel appreciated. You can also have a little pin if you have an in-person event, and whoever's made an endowment gift, ask me about my legacy. There's like simple things you can do that really have a huge return on investment. Super
Ron,
quick review.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a
Yes,
question?
please.
And you might touch on this, but one thing that I have like not struggled, but have questioned is like how do you get people who have included you in their plan giving but haven't communicated that to you?
I would kiss you. Well, maybe I would hug you or fist bump you if you were here. I'm so happy you said that because I actually have this written down, but I haven't said it yet. when you're trying to find out if people have already made this gift, I've written this letter so many times for different organizations. It's basically, we have this legacy thing. We know many of you have already done it, but we don't know who has done it. So if you phrase it, whatever, if you could let us know, you'll be part of our legacy society. And whatever you want to, you could have it the Park Society, whatever you call people who've made these gifts. They should have a name. And just ask them. And then you can put a little thing, and you'll see it on the next slide, that says, like, it's basically a letter of intent. I leave X in my will to you. But what you add is, if you haven't done this already, but want to, contact me and I will tell you all about it. Something like that. But that's really the key, because a lot of times money comes in and you don't even know how. So that's really important. And one other thing I want to add, this is a good thing to write down. I just like to pause for a minute for effect. No, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm just kidding. When you're prospecting, a lot of people think, oh, it's the big donors. I have to hit these big donors. The data shows it's not the largest donor, it's the most committed. So you want to look at length of time. So when you're going through your database and figuring out who to market legacy gifts to, look at length of time. 10 years is a pretty good indicator. I used to always go with 25 years because I had the data, but 10 years is a committed individual. And those are people who you should market to.
Ron, can I add one thing too?
Please.
I think that, when we talk about annual campaigns or capital campaigns or any sort of large scale campaigns, we always want to see that the board is leading by example. So to be able to get 100% commitment from each of your board members, so doing an integrated ask, maybe 1 year where you sit down and you ask them, hopefully you're all doing annual campaign asks in a formal way to each of your board members, where they have an opportunity to talk about we see them as actual donors, right? Not just board members, but we need to steward them. We need to cultivate them. We need to understand what their wants and needs are. And part of that conversation should be, will you put us in your will? Will you please sign a commitment form that you put us in your will? So that your board is also leading by example. So we can say our board has 100% committed to legacy giving.
Awesome. Yes, I echo that. I'm glad you said it. That goes back to, someone was talking about governance. And when you're putting together your board guidelines, I recommend putting in there all board members have to make an endowment gift. And it doesn't have to be, so, you can put like, amount is, like there's no like threshold, like, or you could put like, it has to, a gift of at least $1,000 and up in their will. But I would even go that far just to, to build that culture of endowment giving. It's really hard at first. And like Stephanie said, getting board buy-in makes a huge difference. We're running against
honestly, I think that should be your first step along the process. Board, let's do it, yeah,
I agree. Start with the board or a subset of the board, but somewhere getting buy-in from the top makes it much more beneficial and makes a lot more people want to follow suit. Really quickly, so these are some language you could steal. The beneficiary designation, this is IRA, IRA, life insurance, 401k. You can usually go online for most of these organizations and just fill in the information and give them a percentage. And when you're talking to your donors, and this goes back to tomorrow, what you said, you want to ask them like, could you give me the wording? Could you show me what you put in your will? Like, having those documents makes life much easier. And that's called formalization. And that I could spend a whole hour talking about that. But that is an important process. On the right, you should steal this, make your own. This is just, I called it a letter of intent sometimes. I called it a declaration of intent. These are just ways of getting people to put their name in your endowment fund. This is how you can make an endowment gift. I give to your charity, and it should be like the correct name, no spelling errors. You should really look at this closely. And then they put in a percentage or a dollar amount, and then they're automatically part of your society. You honor them, blah, blah, blah. I know we're at 1. I could stay a few more minutes if people have questions or want to talk. I don't know if anyone else can. So here's my email. There's my phone number. Feel free to email me, text me, and we could set up time to talk if you have more questions.